been in the dark for far too long. Welcome to Daylight. Here's Dan Bongino.
Yeah, all right. Thank you, Joe. Joe always does the best intros.
No problem, Danny.
Your game show voice is irreplaceable.
Boy, it's nothing like the old game show voice when you want to cuss, but we won't do that now.
Well, thank you all for tuning in, clicking on. Podcast is just rocking, and I really appreciate it. One of our episodes, finally, we broke 1,000 listens, and we've only been on the air here for 4 weeks. So
that is nice.
Yes, thank you so much.
Man.
And, please continue to spread the word about the podcast. It's doing incredibly well right now. And follow me on Twitter at DBongino, Instagram DBongino, and I'm on Facebook at Dan.Bongino. So here's what we're going to cover today. I don't want to dig too deeply into the wonkery of the net neutrality disaster that the FCC and the Obama administration just imposed upon us. Because really what you need to know is it's another government-created problem for a solution. Yes, I said that right. I didn't say that wrong. It's not a solution for a problem. It's government creating a problem for a solution. And that solution has always been the free market, freedom, liberty. I don't even like the term free market. It's just been freedom in general. Market makes it seem like it's like a bazaar somewhere. Like we go outside and we're bartering away for freedom and liberty. Can I have my liberty? Oh, thank you. Freedom and liberty in general works every time it's tried. It works, of course, with hiccups because we're all sinners. We're all fallible human beings. But it works because people yearn to be free. They were born free. Your rights were given to you by the Almighty, by the All-Powerful. They weren't given to you by government bureaucrats. I'm not asking you for my rights, elected officials, if you're listening. I don't care about your opinion on my rights. I was born a free man. And the net neutrality disaster may seem like, it's just some wonk stuff that involves Verizon and Tumblr and Netflix. No. No, it doesn't. It's another example of the government partitioning off, slivering away your liberty piece by piece and bit by bit, and it all happening to one big round of applause. Oh, look, the government fixed it. So I got to thinking, how do we cover this without boring people with the wonkery of what's happening on the internet? And, the new liberal bumper sticker on net neutrality. The fact that Barack Obama, Joe, loves net neutrality should have been like in some circles, they call that a clue, like run away from it. But some, a very limited circle, but some of the younger kids who love freedom and liberty, they're all over. They think this thing is great.
And I don't know if they even know what they're talking about. I don't know how you can think it's great. The government scored a coup on this one. They got a twofer, man. They're going to the new tax outlets.
Right. New tax outlets.
And they control the content.
Right, exactly. Isn't it? It's awesome, isn't it? Man. I mean, if you're a far left liberal, it's great. And their new bumper sticker on this is, I love this one, all bits are equal. Really? So all information traveling over the internet is equal. So Joe, you got you got some 65-year-old guy in a foreign country watching porn, and his traffic is equal to, say, a senior citizen who's getting some medical monitoring over the internet via her hospital or doctor. Oh yeah, all bits are equal, right? It's just as important for that guy to get a porn fix as it is for a woman to stay alive. That's like a knucklehead thing to say. Are you kidding me? This is it. Remember, Joe, liberal bumper stickers? This is all it is. The liberals love this stuff. Net neutrality. All bits are equal. Slap the bumper sticker on your Subaru Outback. Go out with your granola bars, and it's all good. You don't have to think about any of the ramifications. Listen, do you understand? I hate this term, but you are pissing away your liberty. You really are, bit by bit. And I put a Facebook post up about this today, saying about how the Freedom Train left Liberty Station a long time ago. And it's moving further and further away. And it seems like the Republican Party these days is feckless. What do? All they do is they're like, we're just going to slow the train down. No one ever talks about reversing it and actually moving back towards Liberty Station. I'm a little salty today. This net neutrality thing's got me fired up because I've been getting these Twitter battles on it. And there's only two type of people that respond to me in support of government-controlled internet. A lot of younger kids who don't know what it is, and lobbyists who I promptly call out when I post their LinkedIn page, and then they usually never respond back. But I have a couple good sound clips here, by the way, from Milton Friedman. They're classic. Some of you may have heard them before. But I want to talk about this net neut in context of bigger government and government solutions for problems that free market hiccups will eventually work themselves out. There's always going to be hiccups in free markets, always, because we're fallible human beings. We're all sinners, folks, right? But those mistakes in a free market are usually corrected by freedom and liberty itself. And I was listening again to one of my favorite authors this week. He was on another one of my favorite podcasts. We'll give a plug to another podcast, right? That's fair, Joe.
Yeah, sure. Go ahead.
Econ Talk with Russ Roberts. I know a lot of people who listen to my show probably listen to that as well because it's really terrific. Russ Roberts does a great job on it. But he interviewed one of my favorite authors, Nassim Taleb, who wrote The Black Swan. Loved the book. Joe's probably tired of me talking to him about it. But
no, but now I have to read it.
Yeah, I keep telling.
I've been hearing about this thing for about 4 weeks.
I know. I'm driving you nuts. You're probably like, all right, with the Black Swan already. But Taleb has a couple of different episodes with Russ Roberts on Econ Talk, and I happen to run into an older one. And he brings up this great point that's been brought. He's not the first person to bring it up, but he's very eloquent in the way he articulates it. He was talking about how government solutions can never really work for a problem outside of local government solutions because there's skin in the game at the local level. I mean, if your neighbor's on the HOA, he's the HOA president, and the HOA passes a law that says if you grow a pear tree in your front yard, we're going to start shooting up your house. You all of a sudden, you're talking to your neighbor next door going, hey, we're not rolling there, okay, buddy? Because there's accountability. You know your neighbor. But at the federal level, as the bureaucracy gets more and more untouchable at the national level, there's no skin in the game. And the title of the podcast with Russ Roberts, with Taleb is on it, I think it's called Skin in the Game, where he goes into this whole thing how big federal government problems for solutions, not solutions for problems, rarely work because there's no skin in the game for them. Think about this in regards to net neutrality, Federal Reserve policy, even though it's only a quasi-federal aid. I refuse to believe it's independent at all, although it's supposed to be. Federal Reserve policy, Obamacare, it doesn't matter. Just randomly fill in the blank on some government solution, right? And I use that term solution very loosely. Where do they have skin in the game? Obamacare? No. They carved out their own exemption. And contrary to what the libs, who will believe anything the president tells us, unbelievable. The president has like mind control over them, has told you there is a carve out for the elected officials who voted on this debacle. It was the Grassley Amendment. They were supposed to buy into the Obamacare exchanges and then got out of it. That's called an exemption, okay? You can call it whatever you want if you're a liberal, but you're just lying to yourself, okay? The tax hikes, they don't care. They don't pay the taxes. John Kerry parked his yacht in Rhode Island to avoid Massachusetts taxes. The Clintons just established this real estate trust to avoid paying taxes on their wealth. It's all a scam. It's all a scam. They have no skin in the game. So when they legislate a policy like net neutrality, they don't care. It doesn't affect them because here's what's going to happen. These deals that were done with freedom and liberty in mind were Verizon and Tumblr and Netflix and Comcast and AT&T and all of these, evil corporations to those libs. While they were working things out, hey, Netflix, you want to pay us for this? We'll get you faster service, but we got to keep other people in touch. You're clogging up our bandwidth. The neighborhood can't get fast internet because a couple of neighbors are watching Netflix all day. Whereas that was all going to work itself out in a free market. Now you inject the government, and what's going to happen? What happens every single time? No one in Congress is going to get hurt. They don't care. Believe me, if their internet was slowed down up on the Hill, there would be hell to pay as a result of net neutrality. But it's not going to happen. They'll always carve an exception for themselves. Not to mention, don't think for a second these deals are not going to be worked out on the side with Congress and elected officials and bureaucrats being the intermediary. In other words, like, hey, slip me a little $5 here, Daddy-o. We'll make sure, you the internet service provider, we'll make sure you guys get a sweet deal and you're exempted from all these requirements, just like we exempted ourselves from Obamacare. Don't think for a second this scam hasn't been done 1,000,000 times over. They have no skin in the game. And the irony, again, about these big government-created problems for market hiccups is not only they not have skin in the game, Taleb explains the difference between probability and degree. In other words, like the libs love to talk about hypotheticals. This is their thing. They love hypotheticals. So on net neutrality, their big thing was, well, what would happen if, say, the Drudge Report, which is, relatively conservative libertarian, everybody's pretty much heard of Drudge. was blocked by Verizon because they didn't like conservatives. Okay, did that happen? No, but what if it happened? Oh, but it didn't happen, libs. Oh, but what if it does happen? Listen, it didn't happen. So, okay, now they're playing with hypotheticals. But when you give them a hypothetical and you turn it around on the libs, like we did with Obamacare, hey, what's going to happen when these companies are forced, these health insurance companies are forced to provide all of these services that are really expensive? Aren't rates going to go up? They're like, no, that's not going to happen. Well, we were right on that one, like we were right on pretty much everything else. But when you say to people things like, okay, well, putting a government in between me and my connection to the internet, so now I have to go through a bureaucrat to get permission, don't you think that that's going to kind of corrupt the relationship a bit, that the government's going to want its cut and it's going to want to start to sanction things as its power grows? Oh, no, don't get into hypotheticals. What are you talking about, libs? You just gave me a hypothetical. You just told me that the government was going to shut down my Drudge Report when it's never happened. So what I'm getting at with the probability now versus the degree is it's easy for you to engage in these probability type conversations with me. Well, it could happen in the future. But what you don't understand is the degree of the problem created matters. In other words, the problem created if Verizon shuts down my Drudge Report is small in degree. You know why? Because I'd cancel Verizon and I'd go to Comcast or somewhere else. Or I'd go to wireless. That's a small problem in my life. My life. The problem, the degree, I hiccup there. You got that? Yeah, Joe's like laughing at me over there. But the degree of the problem created if the government does what I know it's going to do is pretty darn severe. A license to get a website, potentially 16% tax on the internet, as some people are quoting, a new internet tax. Look at all the fees you get on your phone bill, all these taxes.
How about a license on your computer? That's not out of the realm of possibility.
To boot up. Right, sure. Sign in before you log on to the internet so we know where you're going. And, Joe, for all these people, by the way, that are listening to you and I right now, and listen to all our liberal buddies, thanks for listening. I mean it. I appreciate it. You're not my enemy, but I do want you to listen with an open mind. They're probably saying, oh, Dan, Joe, you guys are both crazy. They ever heard of the fairness doctrine? I mean, this stuff has happened before, the fairness doctrine, where they were dictating content that was supposed to go over the air to companies that own these radio stations. This stuff happens all the time. This isn't black helicopter stuff, I mean, this is what really worries me. So remember, there's a difference between saying something's probable and engaging in hypotheticals, and then engaging in those hypotheticals and considering the degree of the problem you're creating. You are creating a massive problem in degree if you inject the government between me and my internet, whereas a relatively small degree of a problem is created when there's a market hiccup like Verizon slowing down, say, my Netflix. And, Joe, I have Netflix and I have Verizon. I don't like it when I haven't had any buffering. But I don't like it when the picture quality is degraded. But that doesn't mean I want a government bureaucrat in my living room watching a movie with me. Can you imagine that? wait, hold on. Imagine this, right? You're sitting upstairs, like me and you watching some Netflix or something, right? And some guy in like a black suit with glasses knocks on the door and goes, hey, I got the popcorn. Like, who the hell are you? Oh, I'm the FCC guy. You didn't know? I get to watch your Netflix. I mean, this is the kind of stuff. I just never get it.
It's roving watch night.
Right. Yeah, we're in your neighborhood. We're just checking out what you guys are doing. It always weirds me out how people get screwed over by bureaucracy, deep bureaucracy in the government every single day. They really don't. And this is not a knock on the employees. I was a federal employee. I was a local employee with the New York City Police Department. They do a great job. It's a knock on the system. The system sets people up for failure. It's not their fault. But it's ironic that when it's a personal interaction, people hate it. Everyone hates going to the post office. They just do.
Sure.
They don't like going to the DMV. If the government knocks on your door, it's generally not to give you some cash award for good behavior. It's usually a bad thing. And yet when they talk about government in the otherworldly sense, that's not contacting you directly, they love it. They think it's a great thing. It's not. This is going to be just an epic failure. So, all right, before we take a break, let's go to some of the sound cuts here. Milton Friedman, who is a great Chicago school economist. I'm more of an Austrian myself. I know Russ Roberts on Econ Talk is as well. But Friedman had a great way of summing up common sense economics. I refuse to believe economics is a science. I love it. I was more of a finance guy in business school. But having studied economics passionately most of my life, I find it to be a speculative arena at best, kind of like sports betting. There's no science to it. You can gather the information and make an informed opinion, but there's definitely no science to it, in my opinion. I know some economists would beg to differ. So Friedman goes on the Phil Donahue show. This is years ago. It's a very famous sound clip. And he's trying to explain to Phil Donahue the fallacy of the utter absurdity of the idea that government bureaucrats and elected officials have solutions for free market problems that liberty will always fix. So let me start this off with Donahue, and make sure when you listen to this. This is Donahue's question first to Friedman. Notice how he frames the question, asking about capitalism. Notice how he frames it. Hit it, Joe.
When you see around the globe the maldistribution of wealth, the desperate plight of millions of people in underdeveloped countries, when you see so few haves and so many have-nots, when you see the greed and the concentration of power within, did you ever have a moment of doubt about capitalism and whether greed's a good idea to run on?
Do you believe how he frames the question? First, he starts off talking about disparities in wealth distribution, and which one isn't even accurate. Wealth is not distributed, it's earned. If wealth is distributed, where's the darn distribution center? Because I'd like to go there.
Yeah, that was the first thing I picked up when we were listening to this today.
Have you ever found the wealth distribution center?
And who is going to distribute it anyway?
Yeah, who is that? Right. Who gets to say who distributes it? Because they clearly know better than us.
There you go.
So he starts it out with that, discounting completely, by the way, that the degrees of inequality, income inequality, where it's worst is socialist-based, top-down, heavy government countries, not capitalist countries. So he disregards the question. Now, this is decades ago where this was filmed, but it still applies today. And then he ends it off questioning capitalism to Friedman. Did you ever have doubts about capitalism? And is greed a good idea? Here's Friedman's answer. It's a classic.
Well, first of all, tell me, is there some society you know that doesn't run on greed? You think Russia doesn't run on greed? You think China doesn't run on greed? What is greed? Of course, none of us are greedy. It's only the other fellow who's greedy. The world runs on individuals pursuing their separate interests. The great achievements of civilization have not come from government bureaus. Einstein didn't construct his theory under order from a bureaucrat. Henry Ford didn't revolutionize the automobile industry that way. In the only cases in which the masses have escaped from the kind of grinding poverty you're talking about, the only cases in recorded history are where they have had capitalism and largely free trade. If you want to know where the masses are worst off, it's exactly in the kinds of societies that depart from that. So that the record of history is absolutely crystal clear that there is no alternative way so far discovered of improving the lot of the ordinary people that can hold a candle to the productive activities that are unleashed by a free enterprise.
There you go. Now that's what we call in certain academic circles, and I'm being sarcastic, that's what we call a fact. You notice Cuba, North Korea. Last time I checked, Joe, they don't have an immigration problem, right? There's not massive numbers of people looking to immigrate to Cuba. Mm-hmm. There are massive numbers of people looking to emigrate from Cuba and North Korea. I've
never really figured that out.
So these are systems of relatively pure top-down socialism where the societies are collapsing and falling apart. They're collapsing. I mean, they are utterly bankrupt. They're hunger, poverty. And of course, whenever you talk to the, not all the liberals, there are some common sense liberals out there, but the far left liberals that still subscribe to this bankrupt, socialism nonsense, they'll always tell you, oh, it's not the system, it's the people. So Friedman says, listen, I don't get it. The most prosperous, wealthy, well-fed, well-maintained, healthiest societies on earth are capitalist societies where freedom tends to reign. Of course, Donahue doesn't want to accept any of that. But you have to understand, there's no second place. It's us and everyone else. There is no second place. There's only a gold medal in this event, and we won. And the very same people like Phil Donahue at the time who criticized our system They never leave. They don't. You would think if he thought there was some utopian paradise that had to do with socialism and top-down economies where there was no greed or anything, they would be itching to fly there like people buy vacation homes in Florida. But they're not. He doesn't go there. They don't. All right. Let's take a quick break here. When we come back, here's what I'm going to do. I'm going to set up a couple more cuts from this Friedman Donahue interview. It's a classic. I know some of you have heard it, but I have some interesting commentary on it. And I want to give you some numbers on us in relation to social democracies in Europe and just how much better we're doing here where freedom reigns. I'll be right back. Bongino Show. Always love taking on the show. It's a lot of freedom in podcasting. Although I try to, we don't cuss on the air. We haven't ever cussed, right? Yeah, so. Good.
Not
we don't
much.
have to do that. But sometimes, I grew up in New York, and it was like part of the lexicon up there. So, but the nice part about podcasting is the content, the timing. It's all yours. I do a lot of over-the-air radio. I enjoy it too, but you're locked in by break times and things like that. A lot more freedom here to do what I like to do. So it's always fun. All right, so we were playing some cuts from a famous Milton Friedman, Phil Donahue interview in the context of this net neutrality, basically government problems for solutions. In other words, liberty and freedom is always the solution, always. The government couldn't even effectively price a baseball card better than 300 million Americans living in freedom could do all by themselves in minutes just by putting the card on eBay. So Friedman's dismantling Donahue, and Donahue fires back a little bit. Donahue asks Friedman about, what about virtue? And again, I want you to listen how Phil Donahue frames the question, because the left is really good about that. Play cut 3.
It seems to reward not virtue as much as ability to manipulate the system.
There you go. He's talking about capitalism. It seems to reward not virtue, but the ability to manipulate the system? Is this guy serious? What is he comparing it to? You need to remember this. Put this one in the library. What liberals always do, the far left, and socialists as well, is they talk about capitalism and its faults, and they don't compare it to the results of socialism. They compare it to a society that doesn't exist. They call this the utopia fallacy. They pull out these examples. Oh, well, the American healthcare system, someone died last week because they couldn't get access to a doctor. Well, what they don't tell you is in socialist healthcare systems, thousands of people die a year. They don't compare it to those numbers. They compare it to a society that doesn't exist where no one ever dies because there's never a market failure or anything. So Donahue's question's interesting. Well, capitalism, what about virtue? So here's Friedman's answer, again, dismantling the silly Phil Donahue's socialistic tendencies with another great answer.
What does reward virtue? You think the communist commissar rewards virtue? You think a Hitler rewards virtue? You think, excuse me, if you'll pardon me, do you think American presidents reward virtue? Do they choose their appointees on the basis of the virtue of the people appointed or on the basis of their political clout? Is it really true that political self-interest is nobler somehow than economic self-interest? I think you're taking a lot of things for granted. And just tell me where in the world you find these angels who are going to organize society for us. Well, I don't even trust you to do that.
It's frustrating for me. It's a great answer. That's what I loved about Friedman. He had a great way of just distilling it and breaking it down to the simplest sound bites possible. But where are these angels? I mean, Joe, do you think that, well, I know what you think, but there are people out there who actually believe this, that socialism, top-down, heavy government, bureaucratically run societies, planned societies, that people are appointed by virtue? You think David Axelrod was appointed, David Axelrod, of course, the White House strategist.
By virtue?
Right, because he was virtuous. Rahm Emanuel was appointed a chief of staff because he was a virtuous guy. I mean, this is like silly talk. This is the kind of stuff you engage in kindergarten.
If being non-virtuous is virtuous.
Then they win the gold medal for virtue.
Yeah.
But I don't want to only isolate that to Democrats because that would be unfair. I mean, what do you think? Mitch McConnell won because he's virtuous? I mean, Boehner won because they're virtuous? This is just silly talk. We limit government in an effective constitutional republic like we used to have before it started to degrade here. Now we're in a post-constitutional society. But we have a constitution that limits government in an effective system precisely because people are not virtuous. Federalist 51, right? If men were angels, men aren't angels. If men were angels, we wouldn't need government. And we have to limit government because the people in government aren't virtuous either. It's an unvirtuous circle of unvirtuous virtue. That's the whole point. That's why we limit government. That's why we expand individual liberty, local government, at the expense of a federal bureaucracy, not the other way around. You know, there's an example I use a lot to, I think, trying to explain Friedman is it's impossible. Friedman was a genius. It's impossible. It's like trying to explain calculus to Leibniz, right? But if that was the case, right? Some of you listening may be saying, well, we are a society that we're a meritocracy. You know, we're not. That's actually not accurate. I know I say it sometimes as well, but I mean it in a different respect. I mean it in regards to productivity, not regards to virtue. And here's an example for you to prove how incorrect that is. Joe, this is a good one, too. I don't know if you heard me. We've been on the air, I know, on the regular airways before, but I don't know if I've ever used this one on the show with you. And I forget where I heard it, but it's terrific. If your kid, God forbid, say needed brain surgery, say he had some kind of, potentially fatal, brain disease disorder, whatever it may be, and you have two resumes in front of you, and one doctor's success rate on the procedure is 99.9%. But down below on this resume, there's hey, he was arrested for this, he was arrested for that. But all of his patients beneath that have testimonials saying, hey, listen, he may not have been the greatest character guy. He drank a lot when he was younger. He's clearly not the most virtuous dude. But, man, this guy's got magic hands, and he saved my kid's life. So that's Dr. A. Here's Dr. B. Dr. B lived an incredible life, married to the same woman his entire life, is just a terrific human being, volunteers all his time, and his success rate on the procedure is 60%. And the patients down below have a little testimonial, and they say, hey, really super nice guy, had dinner at his house, but sadly, the procedure didn't really work out right. Which doctor are you going to pick?
Well, I'm going to go to the first one.
Did you hear my alarm in the background?
I did.
I know. So I got to post an article. You go to the first doctor.
Sure.
Of course you go to the first doctor. My point on that is that I as a God-fearing man, I'm a sinner. I mean, I am, but I set standards for a better self all the time, standards that are high and I fail to meet like everyone else, but the standards exist and that's great. But society, when it comes to our economy, is not based on that. It's based on productivity. Who produces a better result? That's it. When you go to buy a smartphone, you don't ask, hey, the guy who built this, was he a really nice guy? When you're going in for, God forbid, knock on wood, that brain surgery for your child, you don't ask if the doctor's a really cool guy. You ask, is he going to save my kid's life? Virtue in that case is irrelevant. Virtue is a personal attribute between you and the Almighty and your family. It's not for a macro economy. You couldn't possibly measure that. Virtue, what's the virtue test? When you go in and get a loaf of bread, do you ask for the virtue quotient? Well, 20% of the price was built by virtuous people, and the other 20% by non-virtuous people. Do you see the insanity of this? Taking into account what we feel to be philanthropic or benevolent motives in a macro economy? There's no way to account for that. The only way you can account for this kind of stuff is by price and by value. What you're getting for that value. That's all that matters. That's why liberty works. because you're free to choose or not choose where you purchase your products from and where you choose to give your labor. You know, I would make the case to you strongly that capitalism is not even an ism, like a belief system. It's not. It's really the absence of an economic belief system. It's the fact that prices are determined by a free market. You know, look at a baseball card on eBay. If nobody wants it, the price is low. If people want it, the price is high because millions of people or thousands of people, whoever's interested, are making that decision in lifetime. Not a bureaucrat. He doesn't know. He has no information to price that card. He has no idea. The ability to own private property in capitalism, which again, it's not even an ism. The ability to own private property, what is that, a belief system? That's not a belief system. If I work, someone exchanges their money for my labor, and I choose to spend that money on acquiring the headset I'm wearing right now, it's mine. It's not yours. You didn't work for it. What right do you have for it? Is that a belief system? No, I'm going to kick your butt if you take the headset off my head. I worked for it, not you. That's not a belief system. That's common sense. The ability to freely trade your labor for value without having to ask permission from anybody else. Is that a belief system? I want to go out and work, and you're willing to pay me. Oh, capitalism's exploitative. That's what they'll say. Exploiting. I'm working because I want to work, and you're paying me because you want to pay me. I'm not forced to work there. Unlike, oddly enough, the system Phil Donahue's talking about in socialism, where you're forced to take a job you don't want. Remember the old expression in the Soviet Union? We pretended to work and they pretended to pay us. You were forced into a job, from each according to his ability, right? To each according to their needs, although it was neither. There were no abilities, and whatever you needed, you didn't get. This indictment of capitalism as some kind of belief system in and of itself is just plain silly. It is not a system, sadly, based on merit. It is a system based on what people can produce to make other people's lives better. That's it. It's as simple as that. You know, there are no simple answers in a society full of scarce resources and fallible people. And the fact that, and I opened up the show discussing it in terms of net neutrality, how the government is now going to so-called fix the internet. How are we getting suckered again? How are we getting suckered again that people in the government, they have no skin in the game at all, zero skin in the game on this, other than the skin in the game they have to get reelected, are now going to sanction decisions between me, my internet provider, websites I want to log on, websites I want to create. That's going to go through a bureaucrat who has the answer? This is absurd. Now, I said before the break also I would give you some numbers just to compare it to social democracies in Europe. Because, you know, Joe, I'm not even going to make the silly comparison between, I mean, I did Cuba before as a joke. I mean, no one's seriously going to compare us to Cuba because socialism in its pure form is a disaster. And it's not only, it's deadly, too. Hundreds of millions have died. But I'll even give socialism a bit of a pass, and we'll go with European-style socialism. Here's some numbers I found amazing. GDP, our gross domestic product, per person here. What we produce per American full-time worker is 50% higher than in Europe. 50%, not 5%. That's
Wow.
50. That's what we call a big deal. Yeah. Not like Joe Biden when they passed Obamacare, where he said this is a big deal. There was an expletive in there somewhere. We don't cuss.
And we don't cuss on this show.
Yes, that's
Dan.
our claim to fame. We don't cuss. An asterisk. We don't cuss. This is a family show. All right. Here's another one. This one's fascinating. The poorest 5% of Americans are richer than 70%, actually 68% of the rest of the world. So if you are in the bottom 5%, 95% of Americans have more wealth and assets than you do. You're still wealthier than basically 7 out of 10 people in the rest of the world. That's how prosperous we are now. Here's another interesting one. One of our poorest states, unfortunately, is Mississippi. Mississippi has more collective wealth per person than the state of Greece does, which just reelected, as we talked about in last week's podcast. It's been a bad week for socialism, was last week's podcast. Greece's new socialist prime minister. Mississippi is wealthier than Greece per person. I mean, what else do you need to hear to understand? You know, they freedom, liberty, it works. And, you know, I'll leave you with this thought, and I want you to digest this and take this with you for a week. what are we going to do to start to turn this system around, start to turn around this freedom train? We can't let this stand, this net neutrality. Now, we have to start pushing our representatives to do something. Action matters. Stop talking. Dial it back. Dial it back. Call them up. Defund the FCC until this stops. No more marginal solutions anymore. Big, bold solutions. Big tax cuts. Big individual liberty. A big dialing back of the bureaucratic and regulatory state. No more half-blank solutions. No cussing on this show, right?
Yeah.
All right. Listen,
you got
Coach.
me off guard. I almost cussed.
I know. Well, thank you all for tuning in today. I know I was a little fired up, a little salty today. Net neutrality fired me up. But we'll be back next week with another great show for you. Please spread the word for us. Give me a follow on Twitter at DBongino, Facebook, Dan Bongino, and Instagram, DBongino. Thank you so much for all the support. Appreciate it.
Hey!